Have you ever really thought about your refrigerator? I mean, it's just this box that sits in your kitchen, and somehow it makes the inside cold while the outside stays warm. It kind of feels like a little piece of everyday magic, doesn't it? Well, today we're going to pull back that curtain and see exactly how this magic trick actually works. Okay, so let's get right into the central mystery. A fridge, or a heat pump, which is basically the same tech, takes heat from a cold space and just dumps it into a warmer space. But wait a second, doesn't that sound completely backward?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you put a hot cup of coffee on your desk, it cools down, right? It gives its heat to the cooler room. Heat always flows from hot to cold. It never, ever goes the other way, on its own. So how in the world does this box in your kitchen defy what seems like a fundamental rule of the universe? Well, to get that, we first have to understand what heat actually is.
All right, let's start with the first big clue in our mystery. And to do that, we need to get past some old, kind of outdated ideas about what we're dealing with. You see, for a long time, scientists thought heat was this invisible fluid, this substance they called caloric, that would flow from hot things to cold things. But we know now that's just not right. The modern view, thanks to thermodynamics, tells us that heat isn't a thing at all. It's a process. It's simply energy in transit.
So here's the bottom line. Heat is the transfer of energy. That's it. When you have a hot object, its particles are vibrating like crazy. When they bump into the slower-moving particles of a cold object, they transfer some of that energy. That transfer is heat. Okay, now that we've cleared that up, we can look at the universal rules that govern all this.
So, to pull off this magic trick of moving heat the wrong way, we can't break the rules of the universe. That's a non-starter. But we can be really clever and use those rules to our advantage. And there are two main rules we absolutely need to know. Rule number one, this is the big one, the law of conservation of energy. You can't get energy from nothing, and you can't make it disappear into nothing. You can only move it around or change its form. This rule is non-negotiable.
So how does this apply to our fridge? It's actually really simple and elegant. The total amount of heat that gets dumped into your warm kitchen, let's call that QH, is equal to the heat it took from inside the fridge, QC, plus the energy you had to put in to make the machine run. That's the work, W. That's the electricity you pay for. It all has to add up.
But that first law doesn't explain why heat naturally flows from hot to cold. For that, we need the second law. And what it basically says is that, on the whole, the universe tends to get messier, more disordered. The scientific word for this messiness is entropy. A neat, tidy pocket of concentrated heat energy just naturally wants to spread out, increasing the overall disorder of everything.
And this is the perfect way to think about it. Making the inside of your fridge cold is like creating a small, tidy, ordered space in a messy universe. And just like tidying your room, it doesn't just happen by itself. You have to put in effort. You have to do work. That's the price you pay for going against the natural flow. So the big question is, how is that work actually used? Okay, this is it, the big reveal. We're going to walk through the 4 key steps that work to pump heat from a cold place to a hot place. And it all revolves around a special fluid called a refrigerant. Step 1 is all about absorption. We start with this super cold, low-pressure liquid refrigerant flowing through a set of coils. Now, in a heat pump warming your house, these coils are outside. In your fridge, they're inside the cold box. But either way, because this liquid is way colder than its surroundings, it acts like a heat sponge. It soaks up heat from that cold space. That's our QC. And that heat is just enough to make the liquid boil and turn into a cool, low-pressure gas. Next, that gas gets sent to the heart of the system, the compressor. This is where the work comes in. It's that part of your fridge you can hear humming. The compressor uses electricity to squeeze that gas like crazy, which massively increases its pressure. And a basic law of physics is that when you compress a gas, its temperature shoots through the roof. So just like that, we've turned a cool gas into a very hot, high-pressure gas. So now we have to get rid of all that heat we've collected and concentrated. That super hot, high-pressure gas gets pumped through a second set of coils. You know, the ones on the back of your fridge that always feel warm to the touch. And because that gas is now way hotter than your kitchen, the universe's natural rule takes over again. Heat flows from hot to cold. The gas dumps all its heat, our QH, into the room. And as it loses all that heat, it condenses back into a warm, high-pressure liquid.
Okay, last step. We need to complete the loop. That warm, high-pressure liquid gets forced through a tiny little nozzle. It's called an expansion valve. And this is basically the reset button for the whole cycle. As the liquid sprays out the other side, its pressure drops dramatically. And just like compressing a gas makes it hot, letting it rapidly expand makes it incredibly cold. And boom, we're right back where we started, with the very cold, low-pressure liquid ready to go absorb more heat. That's the whole magic cycle.
So, the process clearly works. But is it any good? How do we even measure how well this clever trick performs?
Well, we don't really talk about efficiency in the way you might think. Instead, we use a measure called the coefficient of performance, or COP. And really, it's just a simple ratio. It's how much you get, that's the heat energy moved, divided by what you had to pay for, that's the electrical work you put in.
And this is the most incredible part. The cup for a heat pump is always greater than 1. Think about that. It means it moves more heat energy than the electrical energy it uses. Now, it's not creating free energy. That would break the first law. No, it's just using your paid-for energy to move a much larger amount of free energy that was already sitting in the outside air.
In the real world, a good heat pump will have a COP somewhere between 2 and 4. That means for every dollar's worth of electricity you put in, you're getting $2 to $4 worth of heat moved into your home. That's fantastic. Of course, nothing's perfect. The laws of physics set a hard theoretical limit, the Carnot efficiency, which is a little bit higher than what we can actually achieve.
But there's always a catch, isn't there? The bigger the temperature difference the machine has to fight against, the harder it has to work and the less efficient it becomes. So it's way harder to pull heat from freezing cold air than it is from just chilly air. This means that performance drops off in very cold climates.
Which, of course, brings us to the big practical question. Given how amazingly efficient they are, but also knowing their limitations, should we all be using this technology to heat and cool our homes?
Well, it really is a trade-off. The pros are huge. They are incredibly energy efficient, and because you can reverse the cycle, one machine can both heat your home in the winter and cool it in the summer. But the cons are real too. They cost more upfront than a traditional furnace, and their effectiveness can really dip in those super cold climates. So the magic inside your fridge is real, it's powerful, but like any technology, its future really depends on where and how we decide to use it.